Good afternoon. Oh, here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to What to Expect Your First 90 Days, a webinar presented by the Placement Exchange 2016 Indianapolis. Today we have three veteran student affairs professionals that will share thoughts on what you might anticipate in a new position after you arrive on campus and learn about the position, your department, and the institution. Before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, I wanted to point out that following the prompt questions that we've already prepared for today, we will answer questions submitted by you. You can ask those questions by using the question function on the GoToWebinar dashboard down towards the bottom. All you have to do is type in a question, and we will do our best to get to all of them before we conclude today at 4:30. I'm going to go ahead and now ask our panelists to introduce themselves before we begin.
Good afternoon. My name is David Betch, and I'm the Director of Resident Success at Coastal Carolina University. And I've been at Coastal about 5 years now.
Afternoon. I'm Ron Thompson. I serve Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina as the Director of Housing and Residence Life. I'm in my 5th year here and earned my bachelor's degree in African American Studies at Western Illinois University and my master's in higher ed at Eastern Illinois University.
Good afternoon, everybody. Torry, Brouillard-Bruce, Executive Director for Residential Life and Housing and the University Dining Experience at University of the Pacific in Stockton, California. I've been at Pacific since 2011, and prior to serving at Pacific, I was at University of Arizona and Montana State University.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris MacDonald. I currently serve as the Executive Director for Housing and Residence Life at West Virginia University. I also serve as the co-chair for Education Resources with the Placement Exchange this year. I've been with the committee 3 years now and have been participating in the Placement Exchange since its inception in 2008. Our first question today for our panelists. Many candidates are stepping into their first professional jobs. What can they expect? What will be some of the challenges, and how can they transition to a new location?
This is Ron Thompson, and I think the first thing that I'd put out there is, when you step into that first role, the first thing to expect is that everything's going to be different. Schools do things so differently than each other, and while the goals ultimately are very closely aligned to one another, the ways of achieving them are very different for a lot of different reasons. It may be relative to leadership's vision, institutional challenges, the bureaucratic variances between schools, between states. All of that can lead to a very different experience. And in a nutshell, I would say that that's really what those challenges tend to be surrounded. And I found over the years that one of the best things that anyone can do as they transition is to prepare themselves for that newness. How do I keep myself open to exploring new ways to do things? And ultimately, I think it has a lot to do with embracing that learning mentality that's led us to be successful in undergraduate and graduate school, and keep a very open mind to finding new ways to do things. Torry, David, do you have anything to add?
I think this is Torry. It's going to be a little bit of a recurring theme throughout the time we have with everybody today, but just that concept of newness and finding the culture. That's always the biggest thing. The cultural shock of institution to institution. You could jump from institution to an institution across the street, and the culture of the institution will be vastly different. And how do you reconcile what you're used to and what you've experienced with what you're about to face and with what you're going into, and that takes time. That's something that just doesn't happen overnight. And I've seen a lot of professionals transitioning to a new place get very caught up in well, I don't feel it yet. I don't feel it yet, and it's because you're trying to make that feel happen. And really, it's something that needs to happen over time. And it'll happen if you give it a chance instead of trying to force that feeling upon it.
Yeah, I would concur.
Yeah, I think these are important comments, and I would also offer for new professionals, it's just really important to recognize and feel confident with the choice that you've made. You know, this is a choice that you've made, and be very cognizant of not comparing it to where you've come from too quickly and too often. You'll stymie your own ability to acclimate and almost be inculcated in a new space of which you are in that great new opportunity. So take time to be open to anything and everything.
And the fact of the matter, as much as you have chosen that place, they have chosen you as well. That's something that a lot of first-time professionals forget, that they have chosen you. You went through the process. You have earned the opportunity to be part of their team, part of their structure, part of their culture. And so, you know, we're going to talk a little bit later about identifying your brand or all the other components of that transition, but they chose you. So a little bit, there's some weight with having to prove yourself, but there's also a little bit of weight that you don't need to carry, or you're carrying undue weight because you think you have to prove yourself. You've already proven yourself. You've already taken care of that step.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next question. What are some of your tips for what to do and what not to do during the first 90 days in a new position?
This is David Betch. I think it's important from get-go to hit the ground running. I think in the very beginning, while you're not working to prove yourself, you are demonstrating your brand and your reputation, which we'll talk about later. But I think there's the idea of demonstrating that you've got a strong work ethic, demonstrating that you're reliable and dependable, and showing that you enjoy the work and you do the work with a smile. So I'd say hit the ground running and be that go-to guy or girl that people can rely on. With that, I would say set some boundaries and make them clear. Determine what your boundaries are. If you're in a position where you're supervising student staff, they don't always understand what those boundaries might be, and intentionally or unintentionally, they will take advantage. So from the beginning, determine what your boundaries are and how to communicate those to student staff or supervisees, your peers, your supervisors, but make sure you communicate that. Speaking of supervisor, I think it's important to dedicate some time to building that relationship with your supervisor. First and foremost, they are not a clone of your former supervisor. They could be a complete stranger, and you're in the stage of getting to know their quirks, their preferences, their likes and dislikes, and invest the time in getting to know them. I had a mentor a long time ago tell me that boss management is a skill, and that's something that you want to work towards. I would say advocate for yourself. Beginning your new job oftentimes happens at the most critical time of the year, right before classes start and in the heat of all that's going on. So those around you can't read your mind, and your nonverbals might not be as clear as you'd want them to be. So if you are at a point of exhaustion, or if you're at a point where you need help or you need support, you need to advocate and let others know you're no good to anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself. So I'd encourage that. Personal life, I remember when I departed graduate school and I said, man, I can pick back up that hobby, or I can start reading books that I want to read for myself that aren't prescribed to me. And then you start the professional job and you realize you're much more busy than you thought you were going to be. You don't have all the free time you thought. But protect your personal life. And if you want to pick up a hobby or start a hobby, dedicate the time, schedule that in. If you want to come up with excuses for all the reasons you don't, you'll find plenty of excuses. So that's a list of some to-dos. Not to-dos, I believe we mentioned earlier, you're hired because you're believed to be competent. Don't try to prove it. Hold your head up, know that you're competent, that you're able, and do some hard work. let your reputation, go forth. And then the last thing I would say is leave the past behind. Not only in, don't be the one who keeps referencing your past institution. Nobody wants to hear that at this institution we used to do it this way. To be frank, it can be kind of annoying. So don't be that person. Embrace the newness, as we discussed earlier. Learn about your environment, accept all the new things, and leave the past behind. If you're leaving an organization or an institution that might have some drama, and your former friends and colleagues like to drag you back into the drama, set yourself apart from that and say, I don't need to know what's going on back home or the past institution, and focus your time and energy on where you are in the moment and focus on building new relationships and leave any drama behind.
Yeah, this is Ron, and David, I really appreciated really everything you shared. Is particularly the point about reminding yourself that you're there to be successful, and why you enjoyed the opportunity to begin with. I always tell my folks whenever they leave for a new role, the first thing I tell them to do is to make sure that you're smiling. People love to see a new employee smile. They love to see them wear some gear from that school, whether it's a t-shirt, a polo, whatever. There's just something to be said about showing that you're happy about the choice. It'll buy you so much confidence over your time. It's really fantastic. The other thing I put out there too is, along David's point about not trying to prove your competence, is when we leave a role, we tend to have been so successful that we have earned additional responsibilities. And when we get to a place, they're more than likely not going to begin throwing additional responsibilities to us the moment we walk in the door. And we have to remind ourselves that we will develop to that point again, but our first priority is to develop a mastery of our new role, a command of our new environment, and develop successful relationships with our new colleagues. And if we do that, those additional responsibilities that tend to excite us and further our motivation will most likely come.
This is Torry. I wanted to chime back in on something David was speaking to about the managing your supervisor. And as you start to ascend the professional ranks, you start to learn more and more the concept of managing up and managing down. Typically, in a graduate level position, or maybe a newer entry level position, you're spending a lot of time managing down. You've got things to take care of, whether it's a staff you're supervising, whether it's a program or a process you're responsible for, and the expectation upon you is to make sure you're managing down. But in many regards, a lot of times people will forget that there's the other side of that coin. There's the managing up, and really getting to know your supervisor. Everybody, I think, walks into their first, not everybody, I don't want to use the everybody terminology too much, but a lot of people will walk into their first role and think, this supervisor is going to be my mentor for life. It's like when students move on campus and they assume that their roommate is going to be in their wedding with them, or they're lifelong friends, and when they're 60, 70 years old, they're going on vacation together. A lot of people think, when I go to this job, this person is going to be my mentor for life, and maybe that's the case, maybe it's not going to be the case, but the only thing that's true is that they're your supervisor. And the other thing that's true is they probably have somebody supervising them. And the tip I always give to my staff when they start here is know your supervisor's priority, and do everything you can do to keep your supervisor content. do everything you can do to make sure that you're working to support your supervisor, and most importantly, I would say do everything you can do to keep your boss's boss off your boss's back. You need to know what's happening up the line. You need to know what's going on, and in some regards, it might not even impact your role managing down the line. But if you're not supported up the line, if you're not taken care of up the line, then you can't do the work you need to do down the line.
Fantastic. Thank you all. I wouldn't add anything to that. Next question. How can someone who is new to a department or campus learn about and embrace an existing institutional culture?
This is Ron. You know, when a first-year student comes to college, one of the first things we always want for them is to immerse themselves in everything about the school. We want them to attend athletic events, student programs, student organizations. We want them to get involved. We want them to go to all of their classes, meet their faculty in their office hours. And in many ways, it's that exact same philosophy that we should be employing whenever we transition into a new organization. When we immerse ourselves in everything that the department and the campus does, we not only help ourselves develop a pretty quick understanding of what happens, why it happens, how it happens, but we also demonstrate simultaneously that we are completely bought into being a happy and committed member of the team. And in addition to that, what I think is really helpful, what I've found in my experience to be very helpful, is when at those events to engage people we recognize as longtime employees or longtime members of the community in conversation and ask them for understanding, whether it's about that event or just about their experience on campus or in the organization, or maybe their perception of your role in your organization. You know, when I came to Furman several years ago, I had the very unique experience of having 4 predecessors here, their previous director was here, their previous director here, and the person before that, who was also my boss's predecessor, had just retired but was on campus 3 to 4 days a week. And you know, I regularly sought those folks out and asked them a lot of questions about their thoughts, their perceptions, their wishes, you know, their expectations, and the more of that we do when we transition in, the more it helps us to both learn about and embrace that that organizational and institutional culture.
This is David. Absolutely, Ron. You've got to immerse yourself into the culture. That is key. Attend as many events and speak with as many students and staff and faculty as you can. I just have to re-emphasize that the more, if you judge a culture based on one point of view, you've got a limited perspective on the type of students or any aspect of that culture. So yeah, the more involved you are and the more individuals you converse with and engage in dialogue and ask questions of, you're going to have so many different perspectives, and your perception and true understanding of that culture will come to fruition. So you might have somebody who's very vocal in your department that says, let me tell you how it's been done. I've been here 30 years and this is how it's done. And if you walk away believing that to be true, you know, question that. Ask somebody else for their perspective and their experience so that you can form your own understanding of that culture.
You have one of those people at Coastal that says they've been there for 30 years and that's the only way to do it? Okay. Thought that was only specific.
Yes.
No, this is Torry. The cultural piece, and I spoke to it earlier about, you know, some things you can look for and some of the challenges when you get in and transition to a new location. Culture is everything. You know, and culture is about what is happening. Culture is about what is allowed to happen. Interesting story to share. When I first moved to University of the Pacific, my wife was working at an institution that was just down the road, and University of the Pacific is the oldest institute of higher education in the state of California. It was founded in 1851, the first chartered institution. Where my wife was working was at the newest institution in the state of California, in the UC systems, in the University of California system. And the funny thing is both of us actually had people telling us, that's not the way to do it because this is how we've always done it. And whether it was 160 years worth of tradition or 9 years worth of tradition, that culture of this is how we do it here is going to exist. And so you don't want to feed into that culture. You want to respect that culture, but you also want to find ways to navigate that culture of how do things happen here. The concept of culture gets into the concept of capital. How do you gain the capital you need to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish or accomplish what you've been charged to accomplish? So take a good look at that as you're planning out your transition.
Thank you for that. I would also offer, I think it's a lot of times in how you present your issues of not necessarily dissent, but of question. It's really difficult to come forth with inspired concepts of change and progression if you do so in a way that dishonors what's been accomplished before you arrived. I think it's oftentimes people are very excited and imbibed with that newness that they begin to comment and make comments that seemingly derail what's already been in place. They put it in a light that is less than favorable, and there's no way to create currency or to identify advocates for things that you want, or you might have some ideas if you do it in that manner. So be kind and graceful as you create questions and look for answers, and be prepared for your mindset to be changed by the culture and be open to that because it always worked here. Sometimes there's a reason why it's always worked there. That doesn't mean that you can't accessorize the way that works so it maybe makes sense or fits with a methodology that you're most comfortable with or an ethos that you're most comfortable with. But do so with a bit of grace, and I think you can find yourself having a far more receptive response.
And before we move on to the next question, I do want to say this concept of, well, it's always worked here. The thing you have to realize is when you're going to a new place, chances are sorry, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so it slows me up. When you go to a new place, chances are the person who might have created something or created a process or started a program is still going to be there. And so when you try to make changes, you're actually running into how they're feeling about that change making and taking place. So take that into consideration.
Thanks, Torry. Let's see. Next question. What can you do during the first 90 days to build a brand of excellence?
Perfect. This is Torry. The brand of excellence is always a unique concept. It's really your own personal brand. And I talk a lot about, and I do workshops both institutionally and elsewhere, have programs and presentations on brand management and how do you define your brand and what your brand is. And so, when I got the opportunity to speak a little bit about a brand of excellence, I was very excited because for me, that brand is something that's about the only thing you have unique control over, your brand. Now, mind you, everybody has an interpretation of what your brand is. Think about it. There's a lot of brands out there. There's people who get paid a lot of money to manage brands, but everybody has a perception of that, and so they can control their brand, but also it's something that's controlled based upon external factors. And so this concept of you never get a second chance to make a first impression. How do you manage your brand in the short run, and how do you get to a point where people start seeing your brand as who you are and what you're looking to do and what you're capable of? First way to do that is get out and know people. I always say you've got to sell yourself before you sell your vision. And if you know what your brand is and you're comfortable with your brand, get out and connect with people in a way that allows them to get to know who you are. The other part is share your strength and be genuine about it. Because if you can't be genuine, then you're selling yourself short and you're giving people a false perception of who you are. So your brand of excellence needs to be what you're genuinely good at, not what you think other people want you to be, because you will never be able to sustain that over the course of your time. And the last part is you have an opportunity early on to start your legacy and what your legacy is going to be. And if you think about legacy, it's one of those things that people think when they go in right away that I'm going to start leaving my legacy, I'm going to create the change, I'm going to be the one that makes things happen. And the fact of the matter is yes, you will be doing that, but you just might not see it. And when you get yourself into a hard spot, it's because you're trying too hard to see what your legacy is, to see the changes you're making. Oftentimes, legacy is something you will never see until you actually step away and remove yourself. And I always use an analogy of a mosaic. And most of the most beautiful mosaics are graphic images or graphic designs that are made up of a lot of small pieces. And when you stand really up close, you can't see what the picture is actually supposed to be. And it's not until you step away that you realize all these little pieces create a beautiful picture. Your legacy is one of those little pieces. And your job while you're there for however long it is to go and put that little piece into the mosaic. And if you're standing right there, you're never going to see what the actual picture is. But when you step away, you see the beauty of the mosaic. The other part to that is don't feel like you have to put a big piece, because nothing spoils a mosaic than one random large piece that doesn't really fit. I mean, there's some mosaics that will have larger pieces, but they're intentional about what they're supposed to look like. If you feel like you're going in and your job is to leave this big impression, it actually will mess up the beauty of the picture. So think about your legacy and think about that brand that you bring to the table as a piece of the picture, a piece of the puzzle that you might not see until you step away.
Very good. Any other comments on that before we move on?
I have none. I think Torry said that well.
All right, wonderful. Next question. What do you do if after the first 90 days you discover that you really do not fit in with the department or institution? This has been a common question with a number of the webinars this season in trying to hit to the concept of fit. Should I stay for more than 1 year if I have a challenge, and those types of questions. So it's definitely on the minds of those looking to make the best decision for themselves professionally.
And I'm glad this question keeps coming up because it's something that needs to be asked. This is Torry again. You know, the first thing I tell people, and I've spent a lot of time talking to our graduate students here that are looking to get into the job search, and much like the internship search process or your first professional job, chances are this isn't going to be your forever job. You know, much like I said, the supervisor you get might not end up being your mentor. As much as you want them to be, they might not be your mentor. The same thing with this first job. It's a rarity that somebody will go in, get an entry-level job, and then they find the perfect institution and the perfect type of job, and they stay there, and they move up through the ranks, and that becomes their forever home. That's just not the case most often. It does happen at times. There are people that actually fall into that, and good for them. It's good for them, but really that's not necessarily the case. And so keeping that mindset of this isn't your forever job, this is an opportunity to grow and to develop, gives you a little bit more of latitude to feel like, all right, you know what, as much as the first 90 days is my trial run for how I might do in this role, the first year at an institution might be the trial run to determine if this is the institutional type I like to work for or the location I like to live in. And knowing that there is the opportunities for transitioning in the position. There's a lot of people who move from position to position to position. Typically, if you do that one time, that's fine. If you're that person who every year has a different job at a different location, sometimes you have to ask yourself, is it me or is it the institutions? And if it's happening multiple times, it's probably not the institutions. And so if you realize if this maybe is not the culture for you, and I'm using this in the context of institutional fit. I know of people who have gone into a role and have had a supervisor that was bullying. I know of people who've gone into a role that work at an institution where they feel unsafe. I don't want to focus on that area so much because there are some different answers that would be given for that. But I'm saying you go into an institution, maybe you're not just vibing and gelling with the culture of the institution or the department. Maybe you realize this specific area within student affairs is for me. That's fine. That happens quite a bit. Your job then is to two things. One, what I try to tell people is buck up, buttercup. I mean, you have a lot that you can gain out of that situation. Two, maximize what you can gain out of that situation. Take the opportunity to identify not why you're frustrated or not why you don't like where you're at, but find about, okay, what can I learn from this situation? What can I learn not only to help myself be a better professional, what can I learn to help myself do the next search so I might not end up into this type of situation? But because it's not your forever job, there's not that pressure of, I need to make it work. Too often people get wrapped up into this mindset of, especially social media feeds into this left and right. There's a lot of people who, they see somebody else, maybe one of their peers, maybe somebody they met at TPE, and they're posting all this great stuff of, I found my perfect fit and I love where I'm at. Two things. One, people really only put good stuff on social media, so you're only getting one piece of the puzzle. Two, because it happens on social media, everybody assumes that it's happening for everybody. That's not the case. And so you don't have to feel that pressure of, well, I'm not having an experience like so-and-so, or maybe one of your peers from your grad program is often their perfect job. That's a little bit too much of a pipe dream. Understand that you might only be at a place for 1 year or maybe 2 years when you thought this is going to be a 3 to 5 year and it's not fitting into my professional path. Keep in mind that you can gain something from it and seek out another opportunity.
This is David. Torry, that's all great information, and I think you provided incredible advice. It's a tough situation if you end up at an institution and you start questioning the fit. That's challenging for anybody to have to go through, because the hope and dreams were that it was going to be, you know, utopia and everybody's going to love one another to be perfect and great, and then you learn otherwise. The only piece I would emphasize is utilizing a confidential, trusted advisor or mentor, somebody who is removed from the current situation, who has a different vantage point and can speak to who you are and help challenge you in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your emotions, and help you assess what are the pros, what are the cons, and you know, and protect you from making a rash decision. So identify who that mentor is, be open, be honest, utilize their feedback, their assessment, bounce ideas and thoughts and experiences off that individual, and somebody to kind of help guide you in your decision-making process.
Right, thank you both. Our next question, and before I ask this question, just a reminder to those participating that you're welcome to ask additional questions in the question format in the GoToWebinar dashboard down there towards the bottom, if there's something that you are looking to get some response to or some insight on that you've not yet heard today. As the first 90 days pass, what are other things to keep in mind throughout the first year in a new position?
This is David again. I think it's critical to embrace the full cycle. The fall semester will be different than the spring semester and different from the summer term. It's important to have experienced all of that and be ready and prepared to accept all those different nuances. And it's important to fully embrace and experience all that it has to offer. In order to have a good footing, you need to fully embrace. If you're looking too far ahead and not in the moment paying attention to what you're doing, you're going to miss some things. So be focused on the present, experience the full cycle, and build on what you're learning and what you're accomplishing. I would say it's critical to have a strategy for your first year, strategy for your second year, etc. Be intentional. Ask yourself what you are looking to accomplish. What are your very specific goals, and what areas do you want to learn and grow? So that as you're experiencing that first year and that first cycle, you're doing it with a level of intentionality. I think it's important that as you're going through that first year, that you have a method to measure your success. You need to do some self-assessment. I think that the first source of feedback on your level of success would be your supervisor. We talked earlier about building that relationship with your supervisor, but I think it's important to communicate that you want feedback. You want somebody to provide you feedback on what areas you can learn and grow, so that next year and the following year you can make improvements on that. So build that relationship with your supervisor and with others, those that you supervise, your peers, campus partners that you collaborate with. Ask for that feedback and be genuine in soliciting it. The last thing I would say is position yourself for future opportunities. And in doing so, you need to demonstrate and communicate what are your interests, what are your passions. As you go through the year, you're going to be learning about what's on the horizon for next year, whether it's a committee you want to join, or a department that you want to collaborate with, or an initiative that the university is working on, and you want to have a say in that. Make sure that you communicate to those who make those decisions of who is assigned what responsibility, so that they can consider you and your involvement in the following years. Typically in the spring, decisions are made about what's going to happen over the summer and what's going to happen the following year. If you work in housing and you really want a different facility type, start having those conversations in spring so that you can make the most of the following years.
Yeah, this is Ron, and to David's point about taking in the full cycle, we have to keep in mind that 90 days is a rule of thumb, and some campuses move more quickly than others, some move more slowly than others. And I'll just share as an example, when I transitioned in here at Furman, it was pretty clear after about 30 days that things moved really slow, and I actually adjusted my 90-day plan to a 6-month plan because it felt like it was going to fit a little better with the new environment that I was in, and that was absolutely the right call. I'd also like to add to his final point that in regard to preparing for that second year, one of the things we look for with new employees is when they come in, as important as it is to transition, we also want to see them have a really stellar sophomore campaign. How can they take what they've learned their first year and improve upon their area based on what they've learned? How can they contribute to their role as well as the organization? And I think that's really critical. And so taking some time at some point after those 90 days to start making notes. Okay, so as I prepare for my second cycle, my second go-around, what are some things that that I can do to really elevate everything that that I'm responsible for? Chris?
Thanks, everyone. Sorry about that. I realized I was still muted. One of the things I would offer is that I'm actually currently in my first 2 weeks of a new position. And even though I'm empowered with a great deal of decision making and some other pieces, you have to remain patient and you have to take in as much information as you can. And I think that's just in concurrence with a lot of things that have been shared today. We do have some questions to ask, and again, continue to submit those if there's some things that you'd like to get some responses to. This is from one of our participants, Robert. It was just stated that it is okay to question fit. and that some people may only stay in a position for 1 to 2 years. But I understand that some employers may question why candidates do not have longer tenure. What is the best way to address this notion, especially if a candidate only had a 1-year position due to the fit not working out?
Since I was the one who spoke to that, this is Torry, I'll chime in on it first. There's a lot of ways to communicate what happened. And there's a lot of ways to communicate in a positive fashion what is going on. And your cover letter is going to be your prime example. So let's say you've decided after your first year that fit's just not the place, and you're ready for something else, or you need to try something different. There's a lot of ways you can communicate that. And I've worked with staff members in the past. I've got a individual that I've worked with. I worked with him. I supervised him for a little while. Then I worked with him, and I've kind of stayed on what we call his board of directors, his group of people that help guide and support him. And he, for about 4 years in a row, he actually went from job to job to job to job. And with every experience, he communicated with me why he was looking for something different, what was going on. I was very supportive. I also challenged him. And this is what I think David was talking about earlier. Talk to somebody else about this and get an outside impartial person, because their job is to challenge you a little bit and help you refine why you're thinking about what you're thinking. And if through that challenging you're still able to come to this answer that it's time to try something different, the best thing is you've actually started answering those questions that you might be asked yourself. You've got to sell it in your cover letter. If you have a 1-year experience someplace and are looking for something different, sometimes it's family dynamics, sometimes it's personal reason, but sometimes it's a fit reason. And I think you can actually share that the fit wasn't just there in a way that is diplomatic enough for the new prospective employer to understand that it just at that time was a fit. We all get fit. That's the one thing that I think needs to be communicated is we've all been in this situation. Everybody who's an employer that's looking for somebody has been in this situation, so they should get and understand fit.
This is Ron, and I would just add that I think it's imperative to control the message. And in addition to including some acknowledgement to it in your cover letter, in the very opening response in the interview, I would go right after it, because what you need to do is prevent others from making their own meaning of it. And you're the one who's lived it. You're the one who has the reflection on it, and you have to own that and control that message.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for submitting that question, Robert. Our panelists have shared a lot of information today, and I wanted to ask if you would mind sharing that one thing, especially since the three of you have been responsible for recruiting and bringing on new professionals or even mid-level professionals. You've shared attitude, you've shared patience, you've shared making sure that you buy items, the gear of the school, different things. If there was that one thing that you've either referenced today or maybe haven't because you were trying to be as general in your approach as possible, if there was that one thing that you're looking for from someone who's just joined your team, what would be that one thing that you're looking for that lets you know that they are transitioning well, that they are likely going to be successful, or on the contrary, if you choose, what's that one thing that lets you know that maybe there is something that you need to follow up with them on if it might be a fit question?
This is Ron. I think, simply speaking, I'm always looking to see if they're happy. I need to know that they're happy in the role and that they're happy in the community. And it's really typically not very hard to tell if they are or not. And if they are, then I feel like we can build on that. Whatever transition issues may exist, we can absolutely build on that. And if they're not, then we need to sit down with them and ask them questions and try to understand what the roadblock is. Sometimes that roadblock has nothing to do with the role. Sometimes that roadblock has to do with, their family members, their partners struggling with the transition. Maybe they're struggling with the community, but everything on campus is fine. But we have to understand what that is so that we can help support them. We invest so many resources in the recruitment, hiring, and retention of employees that we're all better served by doing whatever we can on the front end to get them in the door and keep them there, and get them fully onboarded. That we just can't let things go by and not sit down and ask some questions, make some referrals, and get them where they need to be.
This is David. I would say in the first 90 days, it will be of great value to demonstrate yourself as somebody who is constantly learning. You want to learn more. You want to experience more. We talked early on about the newness of an institution, and unless you're accepting a position at your same institution, it's a new place. It's a new department, new politics, new culture, and you want to ask questions and you want to experience things and embrace all of that. You're leaving a institution where you've probably know the systems and process, and it's easy to navigate. You're now at a new place where it's going to take a little extra effort to learn how things happen and who to go to for help and assistance, and the resources are different. So instead of being frustrated by any of that or communicating frustration because things aren't easy or they're challenging or it's not where you anticipated, take it as a learning opportunity. The institution that you're at, it works for them. And this is an opportunity to learn not necessarily a better way, but it's definitely a different way. It might be better, it might not, but it works for that institution, and set yourself up to learn and engage and absorb all that information. The more effort you put in the beginning will pay out in the long run.
David kind of stole my thunder. This is Torry. The learning piece. This is critical. That's the first thing I look for in people when I'm job searching. It's the first thing I look for in new employees as I work with them and work with their supervisors to work with them. That learning component. What are people willing to learn? I don't need you to prove to me what you know. I can see that through what I think your job was based upon your cover letter or your resume. But more importantly, I can see what you know based upon what you're willing to learn. Because everything that you're not willing to learn is stuff you already know. And so the more willing you are to show that you're willing to learn, the more opportunities you have to actually show what you already know. And this opportunity to grow, I do it regularly, and I'm myself, so I'm a little bit biased about myself, but I'm really trying to prove every day to my supervisor that I've got a lot of learning left to do myself, and I've been in this profession for almost 13 years now, and I try to role model that, and I try to create a culture and an environment where that exists, where that learning is okay, that it's okay to want to learn something new and do something new. And so that is obviously the culture of my office and the culture and the dynamic of my department. But I do believe that that is something that you can never do enough of it. You can never show enough how much you want to learn. There's definitely people who show too much what they know, and those are the type of people who tend to not work well within the systems that I'm familiar with or with the groups that I work with.
Those are fantastic pieces of insight. As we come closer to the end, I wanted to offer any last-minute comments from our panelists with respect to people transitioning into new positions. If you wanted to cement that further comment or make that 5-word push to share with our participants to inspire them as they go into their new positions.
I'll do 6 words, Chris. This is Torry. Well, I always use 6 words, so it's like you said I can only have 5. I'm like, it's not going to work, but I'm going to do 6. It's totally cool. My 6 words that I will leave with is take care of the little things. People get so wrapped up in how big and how monumental the new task is going to be. It can become cumbersome. It can become daunting. Thinking about all you need to do with regards to your transition and transitioning into a new role, a new department, new division, a new university, a new culture, a new campus, new climate, new location. All of that can be very weighty upon you. I always tell people just take care of the little things. There's so many little things you can take care of. If you take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. And it will help you feel relieved. It will help you understand that you're finding your role, you're finding your spot. It will relieve some of that stress associated with the transition. So my 6 words, or my 5 words are take care of the little.
This is David. I've got 2 words, and that's be resourceful. The easy way is to go to your supervisor and ask them every little question. However, that can become tiresome for your supervisor or for others. Demonstrate that you're resourceful. Before you go to the supervisor or somebody else asking questions, put the time and energy in to see if you could find the answer out for yourself. Chances are you've been through a training session. You might have some materials in front of you, and review those. The information might be there. Do a search online. Call the office yourself and say, hey, how do I manage this process? Then when you go to your supervisor and say, I've got a question, here's all the effort I've put in, the supervisor is meeting you at a different level, and you've already demonstrated that you're resourceful. We talked today a lot about building relationships with others. We talked about engaging in the culture. Don't sit back and wait to be invited to a program or to an event or to go have coffee with an individual, a campus partner. Be resourceful and go out and make that happen. Take the initiative and make that happen. Invite others to go to lunch with you. Invite others to go to a program or an event with you. Seek out those opportunities would be my little tip.
This is Ron. My 5 words are own your success and happiness. Our days rarely go exactly as we would like. We are constantly confronted with roadblocks, obstacles, and challenging situations and at times colleagues and campus partners. And in the end of the day, what matters most is that we're successful, and we have to be flexible and adaptive in order to make that happen. And owning the responsibility for that allows us to take charge and do whatever we can to make sure that we're getting our job done. And in the end of the day, only we have control over that. And we also are the only ones who have control over our happiness. If you're not happy somewhere, be honest with yourself about why that is. Talk with a trusted mentor or colleague or family friend, and go fix that.
Thank you. Very, very sage words. I guess I would offer my 5 words is your attitude is your aptitude. And while we have to give everybody room for having a bad day or being discouraged from time to time, it's unmistakable, whether it be your attitude towards learning, whether it be your attitude about using resources, or choosing to identify how you can be happy in the role that you have. Your attitude will definitely impact your ability to show what you're capable of and what we might be able to expect from you as your future or then current employers. Thank you again to our panelists for their time and thoughtful comments. I would like to remind everyone to make sure to register as a candidate if you've not already done so. We also have one remaining webinar before we go on site next month, and that is next Thursday. And that is a second offering of Get Ready to Interview, a very popular topic. So if you want to get ready and get your mind set for being on site in a little less than a month, then please take the time to register for that. We will also be announcing registration for our boot camp program that occurs the day preceding the on-site experience in the next week. So be on the lookout for that communication and registration instructions. If you have any questions about TPE, about being a candidate, about the process, please do not hesitate to contact TPE, and we will do our best to help you prepare for your engagement in Indianapolis. Thank you again, good afternoon, and best of luck with your search.